You don't believe that yet. You say it, but it sounds weak in your own head. It echoes, hollow, like a promise you've already broken before. I can do this. You've said it on good days. You've whispered it when motivation hit, and then you disappeared. You stopped. You folded under pressure. So now, those words don't feel like power. They feel like doubt wearing a mask. And this is where most people lie to themselves. They think confidence comes first. They think belief shows up before the battle. It doesn't. Belief is earned in the middle of chaos, not before it. Confidence is not the spark, it is the result. Let that sink in. Right now, you're standing at the edge of your own mountain, not a small hill, not something casual, a brutal, steep, unforgiving climb. And every step you've taken before, every time you slipped, every time you turned around, it's all still in your memory. That's why your voice shakes when you say it. That's why it doesn't feel real. Because deep down, you're not afraid of the climb. You're afraid of becoming the person who quits again. Read that again. This isn't about talent. It never was. It's not about whether you're smart enough, strong enough, lucky enough. It's about something much more uncomfortable. It's about whether you can trust yourself when it gets hard. Because it will get hard. It always does. There will be days when nothing moves, days when your energy is gone, days when your mind turns against you and starts whispering, maybe this isn't for you. And that voice has beaten you before. But here's the truth nobody wants to hear. You didn't fail because it was impossible. You failed because you negotiated with discomfort. Every time it got hard, you made a deal with pain. You said, I'll come back tomorrow. You said, I just need a break. You said, I deserve to rest. And one break became two. Two became a week. A week became another unfinished version of you. This is where most people break. Not at the bottom, not at the start. In the middle, when it's no longer exciting, but not yet rewarding. That's where identities are decided. And right now, you're standing in that exact place again, saying the same words. I can do this. But this time, those words need to mean something different. This time, they cannot be emotional. They must be a decision. Because emotion fades. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. Discipline shows up anyway. You don't need to feel ready. You need to move. You don't need perfect conditions. You need commitment. You don't need another speech, another video, another moment of inspiration. You need to stop betraying yourself. That's the real problem. Not the world, not your situation, not your past. You. Every time you say you'll do something and you don't, you chip away at your own identity. You train your mind to doubt your own words. You become someone who talks but doesn't act. And that is a dangerous identity. Because once you stop trusting yourself, everything becomes harder. But here's the shift. You can rebuild that trust, one action at a time. Small, ugly, imperfect action. You don't need a perfect climb, you need a relentless one. You don't need to sprint, you need to refuse to stop. And this is where the mountain changes. Because the mountain isn't your enemy, it's your mirror. Every step reveals who you are. Every moment of resistance shows you your limits. And every time you keep going, you expand them. Pain is not the signal to stop. Pain is the signal that you are finally doing something that matters. And yes, it's going to hurt. It's supposed to. Growth has never been comfortable. Transformation has never been easy. And the version of you that actually wins, that version is built under pressure, not in comfort. So the question is not, can you do this? The real question is, will you keep going when it stops feeling good? Will you keep climbing when nobody is watching? Will you keep showing up when your mind tells you to quit? Because that is where everything changes. That is where I can do this stops being a sentence and starts becoming your identity. Good. Now stop saying it quietly. Start proving it loudly. Because the mountain doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care about your plans, your ideas, or how motivated you felt last night. The mountain only responds to one thing, movement. And right now, your entire life is being measured by a simple question. Are you climbing or are you standing still? There is no in between. And this is where the truth gets heavy. You've spent too much time preparing to start, thinking about starting, waiting for the right moment. But the right moment never comes. It never has. It never will. Because the moment you're waiting for requires a version of you that doesn't exist yet. That version is built through action, not before it. Let that hit you. You don't become ready and then start. You start and become ready. And that means something uncomfortable. That means you will begin messy. You will feel uncertain. You will question yourself. You will doubt your decisions. And in those moments, your mind will scream at you to stop. But that voice is not your enemy. That voice is your test. Because on the other side of that resistance is a different version of you. A sharper one, a stronger one, a more dangerous one. Not dangerous to others, but dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to excuses, dangerous to the weak habits that have been controlling your life. This is where the climb becomes real. Because now it's not about motivation anymore. It's about standards. What do you tolerate from yourself? Do you accept inconsistency? Do you accept laziness disguised as rest? Do you accept starting and stopping like it's a cycle you can't break? Because if you accept those things, then your future is already decided. But if you don't, if you decide that enough is enough, everything changes instantly. Because standards don't wait for feelings. Standards create behavior, and behavior builds identity. So, if your standard is, I show up no matter what, then it doesn't matter if you're tired. You show up. If your standard is, I finish what I start, then it doesn't matter if it's hard. You finish. If your standard is, I don't negotiate with excuses, then it doesn't matter what your mind says. You move anyway. This is how you rebuild yourself. Not in one big moment, but in thousands of small decisions. Decisions that nobody sees. Decisions that don't get applause. Decisions that feel insignificant, but aren't. Because every time you follow through, you are casting a vote for the person you are becoming. Read that again. You are voting with your actions. So what are you voting for? The person who quits or the person who finishes? Because both identities are being built right now. Not someday, right now. And here's the part most people avoid. The climb gets lonely. There will be moments when nobody understands what you're doing. Moments where people doubt you. Moments where you doubt yourself. And in those moments, it will feel easier to go back, easier to slow down, easier to become average again. But average is expensive. Average costs you your potential. Average costs you your future. Average costs you the life you know you're capable of living. And the price of regret? That's something you carry forever, so choose your pain. The pain of discipline or the pain of staying the same. Because you don't get to avoid pain. You only get to decide which one shapes you. This is where the real separation happens. Not between the talented and the untalented, but between the committed and the comfortable. One group climbs, the other watches. One group builds, the other talks. One group suffers now, so they can win later. And the other avoids discomfort, so they can explain failure later. Don't be the second group. You've been there. You know how that story ends. It ends with frustration. It ends with regret. It ends with looking in the mirror and knowing you could have done more. But this time is different. Because this time, you're not just saying, I can do this. This time, you are backing it with action. This time, you are showing up even when it's hard. This time, you are refusing to break your own word. And that changes everything. Because once you become someone who keeps their word to themselves, you become unstoppable in a different way. Not loud, not flashy, but unshakable. And that kind of power, that kind of discipline, that's what carries you to the top. Not motivation, not luck, not talent. Consistency under pressure. That's the weapon. So pick it up and start climbing. Now it gets harder. Not because the mountain got steeper, but because you're starting to feel it. Your legs burn, your breath gets heavy, your mind begins to whisper again. Not loud, not aggressive, just subtle enough to sound reasonable. Slow down. You've done enough today. You can continue tomorrow. And this is the most dangerous phase of the climb, because nothing here feels dramatic. There's no big failure, no obvious collapse, just a slow drift, a quiet step backward. A small compromise that seems harmless, but isn't. This is where discipline either tightens or disappears. Because discipline is not tested when you feel strong. Discipline is tested when everything in you wants to stop. But you don't. Let that sink in. This is where you stop relying on emotion completely, because emotion is gone now. That initial fire, it's fading. That excitement, it's quiet. And all that's left is the raw truth of who you are when nobody is watching. This is your real identity, not what you say, not what you post, not what you plan, but what you do, right here in the silence. And right now you have two choices. You can slow down and tell yourself you'll pick it back up later, or you can lock in and refuse to break. Because every time you push through this phase, you gain something powerful. Control. Control over your impulses. Control over your habits. Control over the version of you that used to fold under pressure. And control changes everything. Because once you control yourself, you don't need motivation anymore. You don't need hype. You don't need perfect conditions. You become the kind of person who executes regardless. Read that again. Execution over emotion. Action over excuses. Standards over comfort. That is the shift. And this is where most people fall off. Not because they're incapable, but because they're inconsistent. They show up when it's easy. They disappear when it's not. They chase results, but avoid the process. And that contradiction destroys them. Because results only come from process. And process requires repetition. Day after day. Step after step. No applause. No shortcuts. No guarantees. Just work. Relentless, sometimes boring, often painful work. And here's the truth that separates the elite from everyone else. They learn to love that phase. Not because it's fun, but because they understand what it creates. Every boring repetition sharpens them. Every difficult moment strengthens them. Every time they don't quit, they build something inside that cannot be faked. That's why they win. Not because they're different at the start, but because they become different through the process. So, if you're waiting to feel something before you continue, you've already lost. Because the feeling may never come. But the opportunity is here right now, in this exact moment, in this exact decision. Will you continue or will you pause? Will you push or will you negotiate? Because negotiation is where dreams go to die. "I'll do it later" is the most expensive sentence you will ever say. It costs you time. It costs you momentum. It costs you identity. And the worst part? It feels harmless when you say it, but it's not. It's a crack. And cracks spread until one day you're back at the bottom, looking up again, starting over again, telling yourself the same words again. "I can do this." Number. Not this time. This time, those words come with weight. This time, those words come with action. This time, those words are backed by proof. Because you are not here to repeat the cycle. You are here to break it completely. And that requires something rare, something uncomfortable, something most people will never commit to. Consistency without validation. You won't always see progress. You won't always feel stronger. You won't always believe it's working. But you keep going anyway. Because you understand something deeper. Progress is invisible until it isn't. And when it shows up, it changes everything. So don't stop now. Don't slow down now. Don't question it now. You've already come too far to turn around. And the person you're becoming, they don't quit halfway. They don't hesitate in the middle. They don't break under pressure. They rise. Again and again and again. And that is how the climb continues. Now you're deep in it. This is no longer a climb you can casually walk away from. You've invested time, energy, effort. You've pushed past the easy exits. You've endured the quiet battles. And now the mountain is testing something deeper. Your identity. Because at this level, it's not about whether you can keep going. It's about whether this is who you are. There's a difference. Anyone can push for a moment. Anyone can grind for a few days. Anyone can say the right words when it feels good. But not everyone can carry the weight when it becomes part of their life. Not everyone can endure when the excitement is gone and the only thing left is responsibility. This is where people disappear. Not physically, mentally. They check out. They go through the motions. They stop demanding more from themselves. They settle into good enough, and good enough slowly becomes their ceiling. But you didn't come this far to plateau. You didn't climb this high to build a camp halfway. You came to reach the top. And the top requires something different. It requires ownership, total ownership. No blaming, no excuses, no externalizing the struggle. At this level, everything is on you. Your effort, your consistency, your mindset, your standards. That's the weight. And most people can't carry it. But you can. Not because it's easy, but because you've already proven you're willing to suffer for something greater. Now it's time to go further. Because here's the truth most people never accept. The higher you go, the less room there is for weakness. Not zero weakness, but zero tolerance for staying weak. You can feel tired, but you don't stop. You can feel doubt, but you don't obey it. You can feel pressure, but you don't break under it. That's the evolution. You don't eliminate struggle. You outgrow its control. Let that sink in. And this is where a new level of discipline is born. Not the kind that forces you to act, but the kind that defines you. You don't wake up and decide if you're going to show up. You show up because that's who you are. You don't debate whether to do the work. You do it because it's non-negotiable. You don't look for motivation. You operate on principle. This is what separates the elite from everyone else. Not effort, identity. Because once something becomes part of your identity, it no longer requires constant decision-making. It becomes automatic. And automatic behavior is powerful because it removes hesitation. It removes negotiation. It removes the gap between intention and action. And in that gap is where most people lose. So close the gap. Completely. Become the person who acts immediately. The person who follows through instantly. The person who doesn't give their mind time to sabotage them. Because hesitation is a crack, and cracks still spread at this level. You are not immune. You are just more aware. So stay sharp, stay locked in. Because the final stretch of any climb is the most deceptive. You start to see progress. You start to feel stronger. You start to believe it's working. And that's when complacency tries to sneak in. Quietly, dangerously. This is enough. You've done more than most. You can ease up a little. No, this is where you double down. Because momentum is fragile, and success is built on sustained pressure, not bursts of effort. Sustained pressure, day after day, choice after choice. No drop in standards, no relaxation in discipline. Because the moment you ease up, the mountain reminds you who's in control. And you slide. Not all the way, but enough to feel it. Enough to realize that this climb demands everything. So give it everything, not halfway, not when it's convenient. All in, because that's what it takes to become someone different. And that's the whole point. This was never just about reaching a goal. It was about becoming someone who earns it, someone who can hold it, someone who can repeat it. Because winning once is luck. Winning consistently is identity. And that's what you're building now. A version of you that doesn't break. A version of you that doesn't negotiate. A version of you that doesn't stop halfway. You are no longer the person who starts and quits. You are no longer the person who doubts and delays. You are becoming something else. Something sharper, something stronger, something relentless. And once that identity locks in, there is no going back. This is it. This is the part where everything you've built gets tested one last time, not by the mountain, not by the difficulty, but by you. Your standards, your identity, your refusal to go back. Because right now you're close. Closer than you've ever been. And that's dangerous. Because when people get close, they relax. They start looking at the finish line instead of focusing on the next step. They let their guard down. They assume the hard part is over. But the truth, the final stretch demands the most from you. This is where the air gets thinner. This is where every step feels heavier. This is where your body is tired, your mind is stretched, and every part of you is begging for relief. And this is where legends are separated from almosts. Because almost is a crowded place. Almost disciplined. Almost consistent. Almost successful. But almost doesn't change your life. Almost doesn't build your future. Almost is just another way of quitting. With a better excuse. You didn't come this far to be almost. Let that hit you. You didn't suffer through those days. You didn't push through the doubt. You didn't fight through your own mind just to stop when it finally started to matter. No, you finished this completely. And not because it's easy, but because you decided. Because you made a commitment to yourself that you no longer break. Because you became someone who doesn't turn around when it hurts. This is where everything locks in. Every early morning, every hard decision, every moment you chose discipline over comfort. It all comes together right here. And you have to understand something. The top of the mountain is not a place. It's a transformation. It's the moment you realize you're not the same person who started. That version of you, the one who hesitated, the one who doubted, the one who kept stopping and starting, they don't exist anymore. You replace them with someone stronger, someone sharper, someone who executes. Read that again. You became the proof, not the promise, not the potential. The proof. And proof doesn't need validation. Proof doesn't need approval. Proof stands on action. So stand on yours. Stand on every time you didn't quit. Stand on every time you showed up when it was hard. Stand on every time you chose growth over comfort. Because that is your foundation now, unshakable. And from this point forward, everything changes. Because once you know you can trust yourself, fear loses its power. Doubt loses its voice. Excuses lose their grip. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" And you start saying, "I've done harder." That's a different level. That's a different mindset. That's a different life. And here's the final truth. This wasn't about reaching the top once. This was about becoming someone who can climb any mountain, over and over again. No hesitation, no fear, no excuses. Because now you know the formula. Not a secret, not a hack, a standard. Show up, do the work, refuse to stop, repeat. That's it. Simple, but not easy. And that's why so few people ever do it. But you did. You chose the hard path. You stayed when it got uncomfortable. You pushed when it got heavy. You finished when it mattered. And now you stand at a different level. Not because the world changed, but because you did. So don't look down. Don't question it. Don't minimize it. Own it. You earned this, earned this. Every inch, every step, every scar. And this is your declaration. Not quiet, not uncertain, but absolute. I don't wait for motivation. I don't negotiate with excuses. I don't stop when it gets hard. I finish what I start. I become what I commit to. I can do this because I already did.